Welcome to Conversations with Big Rich. This is an interview-style podcast. Those interviews are all involved in the off-road industry. Being involved, like all of my guests are, is a lifestyle, not just a job. I talk to competitive teams, racers, rock crawlers, business owners, employees, media, and private park owners, men and women who have found their way into this exciting and addictive lifestyle. We discuss their personal history, struggles, successes, and reboots. We dive into what drives them to stay active and off-road. We all hope to shed some light on how to find a path into this world we live and love and call off-road.
Whether you're crawling the Red Rocks of Moab or hauling your toys to the trail, Maxxis has the tires you can trust for performance and durability. 4 wheels or 2. Maxxis tires are the choice of champions because they know that whether for work or play, for fun or competition, Maxxis tires deliver. Choose Maxxis. Tread victoriously.
Have you seen 4Low magazine yet? 4Low magazine is a high-quality, well-written, four-wheel drive-focused magazine for the enthusiast market. If you still love the idea of a printed magazine, something to save and read at any time, 4Low is the magazine for you. 4Low cannot be found in stores, but you can have it delivered to your home or place of business. Visit 4lowmagazine.com to order your subscription today. On today's Conversations with Big Rich, we have David Adams. David is out of southern Utah. I'm not sure exactly where he's from or where he got his start. Just like you guys, you're going to learn a lot of information. You may know Dave from Truck Night on America, and he's been in a lot of videos. He's a disabled wheeler. He has a hand-controlled vehicle. And Dave's been a friend for a long time and done a lot of stuff in Moab, but now he's a Sand Hollow native, you might say, or one of the Sand Hollowites. I don't know how you guys call each other. So anyway, David, thank you so much for coming on board and sharing your story with us.
You're welcome, Rich. It's my pleasure. Glad to be here.
Excellent. So Dave, let's find out all about you. So where were you born and raised?
So I grew up in Colorado Springs, Colorado. My dad was military back during the Vietnam War, and that was the last base that he was stationed in, and they liked it, and so my parents stayed there, and so that's where I grew up, was on the Front Range in Colorado.
Awesome. I know a lot of people from the Front Range, especially from Colorado Springs, because we raced out there at Ram Off-Road Park for a number of years.
Right, yep.
So how were things when you were a kid out there? I mean, you're of that age to where things are probably still pretty rural. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah. When I was growing up in Colorado Springs, it was still a fairly small little town. I mean, you go back and you look at it now, and town has just changed so much. Where I grew up, I mean, it was all fields up north of that. I mean, it was actually when you would drive up to the Air Force Academy, you were driving in the middle of nowhere, you know, and now it's dang near full solid all the way up to Monument, Colorado. So it's changed a lot.
Right. And so your dad was military. Was he with the Air Force or was he with the Army base down there? Okay.
Yeah, he was Air Force. He actually had just graduated from college in '67, and he got a draft notice. And so he showed up to the local, Army recruiter, and they said infantry or artillery. And he said, no, thank you, and went next door and joined as an officer in the Air Force.
Perfect. And what was his duties in the Air Force?
He was an accountant. That was his career. So he actually spent a year in Thailand, working with a lot of the personnel that were over there as they would fly missions over into Vietnam. He was one of them that was responsible of giving them basically their bribe money. So, hey, if you get shot down, here's $10,000 cash to try to help bribe your way out of the country. And so he did all that kind of stuff, and it's got some interesting stories. He was one of the last few in country as a basically an accountant, making sure that everything was accounted and taken care of as the Viet Cong were literally coming into the streets in Vietnam.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's wild. So he was there at the embassy then, probably.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. So then, growing up did you get to see your dad a lot as a young child, or with the
Yeah.
oh yeah, okay, so
Yeah. By the time I was born, he'd gotten out. He got riffed after the war, so he'd been in for 9 years, and then he got into the civilian world as an accountant and various different office manager and stuff like that.
okay. And so what was your life like as a young child in that area? Did you get out? You guys get outdoors a lot, or you know?
I was always really into the outdoors. I grew up very active in the Boy Scouts of America, all the
Very
way from
good.
a little Cub Scout at age 8. And then, working through all of that, as a teenager through high school, I was very, very active in Boy Scouts. I worked at a bunch of different summer camps up in the Colorado Rockies. I mean, we were going camping every month. Obviously, with my disability, I can only do so much, although back then it wasn't as bad as it has progressed now. So I could never, run and jump and stuff like that, but I could ride a bike, I could hike, I could do things like that. And so I was very active in the outdoors. Um, I'm the youngest of 4 by a significant margin. My nearest sibling is 6 years older than me.
Oh wow.
So
Okay.
kind of as I got to high school, I was almost like an only child. And so my friends I had in the scouting and stuff like that were huge to me, and I just loved every opportunity I could to get out in the outdoors and enjoy that opportunity, especially growing up there in Colorado. I loved it.
Right. Yeah, and right there on the Front Range like that. I mean, it's pretty amazing. You come down out of the mountains, and yeah, you're still at a pretty high elevation.
Hmm.
Over 5,000, 500 feet there at the base. But, you know, you get into the real high elevations and the change is really dramatic. I remember that going up onto Pikes Peak and
Yep.
looking out and going, holy, I mean, it's a wall drop right there. So you guys,
Right.
your camping opportunities and everything were real close, but up at high elevations.
Yeah. The summer camp that I worked at there in the Pikes Peak Council, I mean, I think our base camp was at like 9,200 feet or something like that.
Jeez. Wow.
Yeah.
And do you mind talking about your disability?
Oh, no, not at all. I'm
Okay.
happy to.
And what is it that you're suffering from?
So it's an interesting name. It's called Charcot-Marie Tooth, and I'll spell that. It's CHARCOT dash Marie MARIE dash Tooth TOOTH. And it's a silly name that most people have no idea what it means. And basically, it's the 3 French surgeons who discovered it in the late 1800s.
Okay.
So that's where the name comes from. But basically, what it is it is a peripheral neuropathy. And so it affects the nerves exclusively in my extremities, both the sensory neurons as well as the motor neurons. So because the motor neurons are affected, they don't tell the muscles the correct thing to do. So the muscles can't work right. And then with the sensory neuron damage, they also result in me having less feeling and less sensation in my extremities, especially the farther you get away from my head.
Okay. All right. Interesting. Thank you for that explanation and definition. When you first said that, I was like, Sharknado. You get
Right.
you get bit
Yeah.
by a flying shark or something.
Yeah. People always wonder, what's wrong with your teeth? Wait a minute. What?
How does that
Yeah.
happen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
So is it a type of like muscular dystrophy or?
Yeah. It's a very fringe type of muscular dystrophy. A lot of muscular dystrophy affect more your central nervous system, spine, liver, lungs, stuff like that. Mine doesn't affect any of my central organs. Mine is all just completely peripheral nerves. So it doesn't affect my life expectancy. It doesn't affect, any brain function, anything like that.
Okay. So it's just your body not doing what you want it to do. Okay.
Exactly. I always tell, like when I used to be a teacher, I would always explain it to my students. It's basically like having this stereo, and your head unit works great, and your speakers work great, and your wiring sucks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
That's kind of what I got. My wiring sucks, so therefore the message doesn't get through, and it gets garbled as it's traveling.
And what age were you when they discovered that you had an issue?
So I was diagnosed when I was age 6. which for a Charcot-Marie tooth, or what they call CMT, is quite young. Most people aren't diagnosed with it usually until middle age. It's a late onset disease. But I was on a t-ball team. I remember playing, t-ball back when I was, 4 or 5 years old, and the coach sent us down to go run around this tree, and I was still on my way down there when all the rest of the players on my team were on the way back.
Okay.
And my mom was like, well, that's kind of different. And so we went through this process of trying to figure out what was wrong. And eventually I discover it through a nerve conduction study, which actually shows the great reduction in the speed and transition of the nerve message as it travels down through the body.
Okay.
So I was diagnosed at a very young age, which is pretty much all I've ever known.
Okay. I was wondering because, when you started off with T-ball, I didn't know if maybe, all of a sudden, instead of swinging at the ball, you started swinging at your teammates or something. So, if
Right,
it's not,
right.
it's not connecting. So
Yeah.
then, what level of scouting did you get through?
I went through all of it. I mean, I was an Eagle Scout. I got my Eagle Scout when I was 14.
Very good.
And then at 14, I became very active in the Order of the Arrow, which is kind of the honored camper version of, Boy Scouts, and stayed with that. And I was active in national and even international events all the way up until my 30s. So.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, I bailed.
Mhm.
I bailed on it as soon as I got my driver's license. I'd gotten my Eagle at 14 because I got presented with my Eagle at 14. I was 13 when I was able to. I could have gotten it, but I was waiting for a friend to complete it so we could do a double ceremony.
Oh yeah,
But it would have been really close, but could have pulled it off. So then, what did you do as your Eagle project? Do you remember?
I actually built a hiking trail up at the Florissant Fossil Beds National Park outside of Divide, Colorado.
Very good. Very good. Cool. So then, what was school like for you scholastically? Were you a good student? Being an Eagle, it can go either way.
Right. I did pretty good. I kind of went through this period that, school wasn't cool, of course, and homework was overrated because I wanted to do the things that I wanted to do. I enjoyed learning and I enjoyed some aspects of school very much, but I thought it was silly that I had to take the classes I didn't want to take, and
Right.
I actually remember having a conversation with my dad, and he said to me one day, he said, look, you need to understand you're never going to be a truck driver. You're never going to be a construction worker. You're never going to be in an industry where you're working with your hands or your body. You've got to do well in school because you've got to have a degree. Okay. And it was really kind of a wake-up call for me that, you're right. I've got to figure out a way to be able to make it in this life, and therefore I've got to use my brain. Right. And so I kind of changed things a little bit and ended up doing pretty decent in high school. And that's when I really fell in love kind of with my passion, and that's history. I had some amazing history teachers in high school and then later on in college that really showed me that history is nothing more than the greatest story ever told.
True.
And so that's what really inspired me to eventually get my degree in history teaching, and I did that for a long time.
Oh, excellent. Okay. I'm a history buff. I when I drive, I don't listen to music. I listen to books on tape, basically, Audible, that kind of thing, and through the library system. And everything I read, it's either kind of a science fictionist type thing, or it is history. If I'm going to read a book, I want to learn something from it, not just, Jane Austen novels, that kind of stuff don't interest me at all. Except for the history aspect of those things, if that's what they're following, the follow line. So,
yeah, I agree.
So then, with doing as a history teacher and going through that, well, obviously through high school, where did you go to college?
So I graduated from BYU.
Okay. So are you LDS then?
I was raised LDS.
Okay.
Haven't been super active for a little while, but my parents still are, and one of my sisters still is, and I mean, some of the greatest people I've met in the church, and there's obviously good people everywhere and bad people everywhere.
Oh
But
yeah, I wasn't being
you know,
judgmental. I was
no, no, I
just questioning because
totally.
going to BYU.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I went to BYU. I went on the 2-year mission to upstate New York. Um, Absolutely had a great time in college. I took a lot of advantage of the different opportunities that were there. Like I went on 2 different study abroads. I had 3 different internships, including my student teaching. I double majored plus had a minor. So I mean, I felt like I took advantage of it as much as I could, and for the quality of education you get, BYU is a good school. I mean,
Right.
you really get a good education, and it's not expensive, so it worked out very well for me.
Excellent. Excellent. And so then, what areas did you teach in? Not
So my main focus was, once I got hired and I was teaching in Moab, is I taught mostly freshman world geography, so high school level, and then sophomore world history. And then I did a little bit I taught debate, was a debate coach, and then also taught some government from time to time to the seniors.
okay. And that first stint was in Moab.
Yeah, yeah. So
Okay.
that's where I got my first full-time teaching job, was after I moved to Moab.
And did you get into off road at that time, or
Actually, I kind of started getting into it before, and
okay?
and it's funny, when I go back and think about my experience, my memories, what kind of got me into it. I had a paper out when I was a little kid, and so this would have been probably 84, somewhere in that range. And I remember seeing a brand new CJ7, and it was parked in this apartment building where I delivered my newspapers, and I just thought, that is such a cool vehicle. When I get old, that's what I want you know and then as I got older and going through high school and into college, and my disability started getting worse, I started getting to the point that I knew that I wasn't going to be able to continue my lifestyle the way that I wanted, in terms of hiking and getting out into nature. And so at that time is when I really decided that I wanted a Jeep, so I could still get out in nature. I could still go out and do these things. I could still go out and go camping, but I didn't have to rely on my legs in order for me to be able to get there.
Right. Okay.
And so by that time, my dad was actually the office manager at a Jeep dealership in Colorado Springs.
Hmm.
And so, I mean, we were obviously around Jeeps all the time. Funny enough, he's never owned one. He's always had, Chrysler products. Um, but after I got back from my mission, I got back in my mission in '97. So the TJ had just barely came out. And I wanted one so bad, but I didn't have the money, didn't have the means to be able to get one. So my dad ended up helping me get a 1990 Cherokee, a Cherokee Pioneer.
Okay.
And so that was actually my daily driver when I was in college, was that Jeep. And I ended up putting a little bit bigger tires on it. I was so excited because my first set of tires were a set of 30-inch by 950. Just I mean, today you think, I mean, heck, they come with, most vehicles come with tires stock bigger than that. But I was so excited. I put a little 3-inch Rancho lift kit on my Cherokee, and I just thought I was so cool. And I had that for about a year, and I was on my way to a Christmas party, and a lady ran a red light and pulled out in front of me, and I T-boned her. And ended up that Jeep got totaled. And so I took the insurance money and finally bought my CJ7 that I'd always wanted.
Excellent. Excellent. And that first CJ7 you saw, what color was it?
Originally, it was white.
Okay.
And it was funny. I remember seeing it there. I met the guy at the mall there in Orem, Utah, and he showed up with it, and it had a 4-inch lift, 4-inch spring under, 33-inch tires, had this 6-point roll cage in it, and I just thought, oh my gosh, this is the coolest thing I have ever seen. And at that time, though, I didn't know how to drive a stick, and it was a manual. And so I actually bought the Jeep, having never driven it before, and then had a very quick course in learning how to drive a manual, which was a whole different ball game for me. But yeah, literally bought the Jeep, having never driven it. I just fell in love with the look of it.
Excellent. That's pretty cool. And that's still the same Jeep that you have?
It is. That's the green Jeep. Yep,
Wow.
I picked that up in January of 1999, and we're going on, almost 25 years together.
Yep. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been through lots of changes. I mean, just about everything on that's been replaced, but That's the heart of the Jeep that I bought back when I was in college.
Excellent. And so then, where else? What other locations did you teach in besides Moab?
So before I moved to Moab, I substituted in the Nebo School District there in Utah Valley for a while. And then finally, after about a year after I graduated, my ex-wife and I, well, wife at the time, decided that we wanted to move to Moab because I'd found Moab during college. I actually joined the Lone Peak Four Wheelers Club out of American Fork,
Okay.
and they were actually getting ready to go down on a President's Day trip. So I bought my Jeep in January of '99, and they're planning this President's Day trip in February of '99. And so I will come to Moab. I'm like, what's Moab? I had no idea. And so I showed up, and I remember that Saturday morning we rolled into City Market, and people are there, they're doing their thing, they're airing down their tires, they're disconnecting their sway bars. I mean, all the rigmarole that goes with it. And I'm like, what are you guys doing? Do I need to do that? I had no idea.
Right.
And so my very first trail ever, like besides just putting around in the mountains and stuff like that, was Golden Spike.
Nice.
And I had no clue what I was getting into. I mean, I'd only wheeled this Jeep, just a couple times on really mild trails there along the Wasatch Front. And all of a sudden, we're jumping onto Poison Spider, and I'm going up the waterfall, and I kill it. And I have no idea what to do. Because, I mean, obviously, it's got the old 4.2 liter motor in it that's carbureted.
Right.
So I got to hold the brake down. I got to push the clutch in to start it, but I got to give it gas. And it was a day, Rich. I tell you what, I'm not sure how I survived. I got to the Golden Crack, and I'm like, I'm not doing it. I'm not going through it. They're like, you don't have a choice. And so Charlie Copsey, who I'm sure you're familiar with,
oh yeah, absolutely.
He was on the trail that day, and he basically was kind of my little buddy that just got me through and just kept me going. And I mean, without him and some of the other people from the Lone Peak Four Wheelers, I wouldn't have made it through. But I got back to the hotel that night, and I thought, oh my gosh, what did I just do? That was either the dumbest thing I've ever done or the best thing I've ever found in my life.
Right.
And the next day, we went out and ran behind the rocks, and I was hit. The bug bit me, and so I started going down to Jeep Safari, and then, like I said, after I finished college and everything, I ended up moving down to Moab in 2004 because Moab was the be-all, end-all. I mean, that was the ultimate in off-road back, in that time, and
yes,
and I couldn't imagine being anywhere else, and loved it.
So that's awesome. The Charlie was one of, I think he was the first one and maybe the only one to drive the upper waterfall on
the proving grounds.
Yep, exactly.
Yep.
And unaided, without a winch. I understood they had the winch line out, but they never got it tight. So that's amazing.
Yeah, I remember seeing video of that. He had the old Unimog Jeep, and if an interesting point about Charlie, if you remember, his old CJ7 was yellow.
Right.
And that's why my roll cage is yellow. Because when he was getting to rebuild his Jeep, I actually bought his old roll cage. And at that time, I had painted my Jeep green because I had replaced the tub. And so I bought his yellow roll cage, and I really liked the color combination. And so literally, that's why here, 25 years later, my Jeep is still green with the yellow roll cage. It's going back to Charlie Copsey and buying his yellow roll cage off his old comp bug, or off his comp CJ.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Small world. And then
I know, it's funny.
At what time did you get into the Red Rock?
So I got into Red Rock right about as soon as I moved to Moab. I mean, obviously, I was one of those, guys that every year you'd get the Jeep Safari paper and you get so excited and you go through the grid, you figure out what trails you're going to do and what days, and you put down the numbers. And I mean, I would spend hours poring over the Jeep Safari paper every year, getting ready to go down to Moab. And so when I got down to Moab, I was very excited to become a member of the club and, start working with them. And so my first meeting, I think we got to Moab in, I think it was April, like the end of April or something. And the first meeting was, the first Monday of the month there in May. And my first meeting, I went and started meeting people, started going out Jeeping. And then, just even a few months later, they had an opening for the land use officer. And the guy that had been doing it for a long time was kind of ready to move on, do something different. And so I started as the land use officer in 2004, and I still have the longest continuous period of service with the Red Rock Four Wheelers. I was land use officer for 13 years.
Wow.
And dealt with that and did all the permits, did all the dealing with the BLM and state trust lands and Forest Service and National Park, and was really big into that for a long, long time.
I'm surprised you have any hair left.
For real.
Because I would
Yeah,
have pulled it out.
it it was an interesting. It was a major learning curve, and luckily we had a lot of really good land use managers in Moab that I was able to deal with, and a lot of it was frustrating. A lot of it was difficult. I mean, one of the big things, that happened as I was land use officer was switching to the new 5-year permit where we began to get exclusive use of the trails, where we were starting to, where Jeep Safari was really turning from less of a, spring break kind of party to more of this, just epic worldwide event that was just becoming this monster that Jeep Safari became in the early 2010s and even on. And so it was interesting to be there and kind of experience all that growth and see the change and see what it went through and deal with all that.
And so once you were in Moab, you pretty much stayed there. And how long did you keep teaching?
So I ended up teaching between full-time and substituting almost 10 years. Moab is just a tiny little town with one elementary, one middle school, one high school. That's it. About 100 kids per grade. And so I actually ended up getting laid off at one point because we had some major funding issues. Long story short, which I'm not very good at, but basically the district financial manager died, and they found that he'd been using the wrong money to pay the wrong bills.
Jeez.
And so they had to end up laying off 20% of the school district. And so I was one of those that ended up getting laid off. So then I substituted for a little while and then went back full-time teaching for just a little bit again before, I decided that I was ready to do something else.
Awesome. Cool. And what is that something else that you decided to do?
Well, not live in Moab anymore.
Right.
That's basically what it came down to. Moab is one of those towns that it is a lot of fun. It's got just about anything you can imagine the outdoors to do, but it is very, very difficult to survive in Moab. Unless you somehow are independently wealthy or something. I mean, it's very typical. People are working 2 or 3 jobs. Most of those jobs are seasonal, which means every winter, you're unemployed. You're dealing with, trying to survive. My wife at the time, she was almost always working some type of seasonal position, and so it was rough to make it. And Moab has changed a lot, as you're fully aware of, in the last 25 years. And it's kind of just become this playground for the elite. The town doesn't really want the Jeepers there. They're trying to push out the side-by-sides. They're trying to minimize the motorized recreation. They want the tourism dollars from the national parks. They want the rafters. They want the mountain bikers. But other than that, they're just not motorized recreation use friendly. And I just got to the point I was tired of banging my head against the wall and losing every single time. And I then came out to Trail Hero for the first time in 2016, with your son, Little Rich, and I was just blown away. I'd heard of Sand Hollow before, and I tried to make it to a couple of the previous Winter on the Rocks, but never was able to make it. And so that first trip that I came out to Trail Hero, it was just like, the heavens parted, and I was like, there's this whole other world that I didn't even know existed.
Right.
And so within
where
2
you're not
years,
overly regulated.
yes, you can go out and you can have fun. You can still have that enjoyment that what Moab used to be back in the day. You can make new trails, you can make new obstacles, you can do them ethically, you can do them appropriately, but you can still do them legally.
Right.
And it was just this eye-opening experience. And like I said, it was kind of that mass exodus. There was quite a few of us that left Moab there in the the late teens period. Of course, Steve Nance being probably the most famous of all those.
Right.
And so I finally moved over to St. George area in 2018, and now live literally right next to Sand Hollow. I mean, I can see the side of the dam from my driveway at Sand Hollow State Park, and couldn't be happier.
Excellent. So what was the biggest battle that you felt you had to wage with BLM to get the Easter Jeep Safari going?
So much of it was just the very idea of it almost seemed like we had to every year fight the legitimacy of the event. That we could justify why we're doing this, and then the damage that's being done to the trails, and what was going on. And the argument that we always had is that Moab is a destination. It is a four-wheeling destination for people literally from all over the world. So if you don't allow us to be able to go out and to do this event, these people are still going to come. But what they're going to do then is they're going to go out and they're not going to know what they're doing. They're not going to know where they're going. They're not going to practice the tread lightly principles. And it's going to be going back to, almost the Wild West days of people just driving anywhere and everywhere they want to go.
Total mayhem.
And so
Yep.
our big push was, let us go out there, let us guide these people, let us teach these people, let us show them how to use the land and use it appropriately, and show that there's a way to be able to recreate on public lands in a safe, mildly controlled environment where the damage isn't going to be done, where you're not going to have a bunch of yahoos just driving over the crypto and going wherever they want. And so that was always the big push, is give us this opportunity to educate and to entertain responsibly and appropriately.
Right. That's good. And one of the things that drives me nuts, and I touch on it in a lot of these conversations, is that Moab and the powers that be, which truly are the city council and county, do not understand, and they don't understand that bikers, meaning mountain bikers, or the majority of mountain bikers. I'm not going to say all mountain bikers because I don't want to be inclusive like that. But, most mountain bikers, most rafters, most rock climbers, the raw hikers, they don't spend a lot of money.
Right.
They don't, for the majority of them, they're camping down by the river. They don't, they may buy gas if they have to in town, but they don't even use city market properly. I've seen so many people forage at city market, and that's the best way I can put it, is forage. And you walk through that store and you find all these empty containers of crackers and chips. And I saw a guy in there one time busting off the fresh mushrooms, busting off the stems and bagging only the caps.
Oh my gosh.
And leaving the stems in there.
That surprised me. Yep.
And and yet the city council and the county still, oh my God, we got to go to the non-motorized recreation. Motorized recreationists buy. They have purchasing power.
Yep. And that was always kind of our joke, there amongst the locals in Moab, is, you'd have a mountain biker come in for the weekend, and while he was there, he wouldn't change his underwear or his $20 bill.
All he left was his TP and waist.
Right, exactly. But you're so true. I mean, if you look at the financial impact that the motorized events had in Moab, I mean, they were tens of millions of dollars a year. But it's almost like the city council was almost blind to that, or thought that it was just showed up by magic. It's like they didn't understand that, it's the Jeepers that we're coming into town, that we're, driving our trucks and our trailers or our campers or our RVs, and we're staying at the hotels, we're staying at the campgrounds, we're buying gas, we're buying food, we're going out to dinner, we're buying parts as we broke, and so much money came from that motorized recreation economy. And they just didn't care. They wanted to be almost like another Aspen or Vail or Park City or something where, come spend your money, but, don't go out in nature. Just kind of leave the money and then go away.
Right. And they don't understand that money that is spent, like you just mentioned, is the money that stays in town.
Right.
It's, people aren't coming to Moab and then buying a bicycle.
Right.
unless they destroy theirs, it gets run over in the parking lot by somebody, some guy backing his minivan out. They're not buying a new bicycle. They're not buying a raft. They're
Right.
in there and they're either renting or you know, they brought their own,
Yeah.
so they don't need anything from town. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was the thing that because I knew a lot of the people on the city council and county council. I went to those meetings quite often. I was pretty politically involved while I was there. And that was the thing is I always said, you guys need to push these off-road events because Moab needs shoulder season events. We're inundated during the summer, but the thing is with off-roading, you can still do that in November over Thanksgiving weekend or even over Christmas or President's Day, where none of the other outdoor activities really can you. I mean, who goes to Moab to go mountain biking in the winter or goes rafting in the winter or even go to the parks? But yet you can do that in the winter. I was like, guys, you guys are missing this opportunity to harness in more money and make Moab a true year-round economy. They just don't care.
Yeah, and the way the police would just be on top of everybody. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, because I wintered there and stayed at Danny Grimes' house for almost 90 days,
Yeah.
and me and Shelly, and had a great winter off season.
Right.
Our off
Right.
season, and it was
Yeah.
fantastic. Never had any interaction with the police or, I mean, we spent a lot of money there at all the businesses, but when it's a weekend or a week where there's a lot of wheelers in town, the city police just seem to be like so anti. Well, it's like, okay, now here's how we get our overtime pay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they were just
And
on you for anything.
and it seemed like the PD and the state were the worst. I knew a lot of the deputies, and I was pretty good friends with the sheriff, and they were always really cool. But it seemed like especially the state troopers, they viewed Moab as their piggy bank in so many ways. And it was sad because it's like, as long as guys are, obeying the laws, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, for the most part, most Jeepers are pretty cool people, but it seemed like they always had to try to make it more than what it was.
Yep.
And then when they would bring in all the out of state, or not out of state, but the
Out of
different
district. Yeah.
state, out of district, especially for Jeep safari and stuff like that. I mean, it just became crazy. It was sad to see what it was because that's not the Moab that I knew and fell in love with.
Right. So, what is name your 3 favorite trails in Moab?
That would be a good one. I would have to say Pritchett Canyon is just iconic.
Right.
I mean, in terms of just beauty and remoteness and challenge of the trail, I always love Pritchett. Anytime I got to run Pritchett, and then well, not always, but usually I would go up Pritchett and then turn and go up Hunter Canyon and out through the end of Behind the Rocks. That was always one of my favorite trails. Next would probably be out in Area BFE. One of my favorite to do, especially someone that hadn't been out to Area BFE, is we would, go in there, drop down into the bottom of the wash, go up through the gatekeeper of Epler El Dorado, turn left, go up through Minor Threat and up through Green Day.
Right. That's how we use that when we raced out there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. You guys did that one a lot with your dirt riot and stuff.
Yes.
And that one was just such a great one because it was enough that even somebody in a, fairly stockish rig, I mean, you could get through it on 35 if you took the right lines and stuff, but you could also go out in the full blown 2 buggy or, even rear steer rig and just have so much fun. And so, that trail out in BFE, I love that one. That was one that I did on a quite regular basis just because it was so much fun. And it really got an opportunity to show people what extreme wheeling is in Moab. Because what I came to learn, Moab doesn't have a lot of extreme trails. I thought they did when I first moved there. I thought, this place is amazing. Nobody could ever do anything more difficult. And then as I got there, you kind of, you only run Poison Spider or Cliffhanger or, stuff like that so many times. And so BFE was so instrumental and influential because that opportunity to go out and do the hardcore stuff. And we had real good relationship with the all the owners originally, and the little club that I was in, the Moab Friends for Wheeling, ended up actually building and maintaining a lot of those trails out in area BFE, and it was just such a fun little unique area to be able to go out there and really push yourself.
Right.
So I'd say that would probably be number 2. And then, even though it's kind of cliche, you can't go to Moab and not run Hell's Revenge. You just have to go out and do it. And I mean, yeah, you can run Hell's Revenge in 45 minutes if you got the right rig, and go out there and just zip through everything. But it was just so neat to be able to take people, especially people that had never really been wheeling or never been that kind of wheeling, and you go up that first chicken fin and you just see their faces, and then you drop down there by the abyss and you're heading out towards, Hell's Gate at the end. You go out to the overlook. And then even, you got a good group of rigs, you go and you run the named obstacles, you go and you run, Hell's Gate, and you go and you run Mickey's Hot Tub, you go and you run the escalator, and, all that type of thing. And when somebody who's not been really wheeling, when they get done with Hell's Revenge that first time, they will never, ever, ever forget that day.
True. Very true. Okay. One of my favorite trails out there is the Rim, but
yes,
I really don't ever want to do it at night.
Yep.
I never feel like I'm going to roll over out there, even though so many people do. But it's just the vistas are just incredible.
Yes. Yeah, there's nothing like I loved. We would go up, we would do a night run, and we'd get up to the Rim, and then watch the sunset, and then turn around and come back down at night. But it took me a little while. I kind of have a love-hate relationship with the Rim there for a bit, because when I first moved up to Moab, my Jeep wasn't that built, and so I didn't have very good gearing, and I didn't have very good brakes. So going all the way down there, I'm riding my brakes the whole way, having to put it in neutral to be able to get myself to stop because I was pushing through my brakes.
Right.
And it took me a long time before, I decided I'm going to learn this trail, and I'm going to get comfortable up it, down it, backwards, sideways, any way you want. And I mean, I got to the point that, I could spot somebody up the Moab Rim from my phone in my living room. Okay, as you come up, here's where you're going to put your tire. You're going to come around this little rock, and yeah, the beauty and the majesty of getting out on the Moab Rim is just amazing. Great trail.
Yeah, the last time that you and I wheeled together was on Moab Rim, and that was during Christine Sullivan's run.
Yep.
And we got to the top, and I had my locker, the seal in my air locker had gone out. So I turned around and came back down. I'd called Steve Nance and said, okay, do you have an open bay? And he goes, yeah, we just opened. So yeah, I've got an open bay, but it's first come, first serve, Rich. So we were up there at the observation point, and I turned around and drove down, and I was standing there at Steve's in like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And people were coming up and just bailing out of my way because I came flying down the trail because I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to, I didn't want to sit and wait for my rig. I wanted to get it done.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's amazing how, you could get up to the top of Moab Rim and back down in an hour.
Yeah.
And so it was a fun one, no doubt.
Absolutely. So then you guys made the move to St. George Hurricane.
Yep.
And what was that like for you personally to get out of a community that you had you were very well established? Was it easy to do the same thing over in Hurricane?
Not in the same way. Moab, I think, for lack of sounding kind of maybe cliche, I really came into my own in Moab. I became very, very heavily involved in the social media side. I ran all the social media stuff for the Red Rock Four-Wheelers, their Facebook page and stuff for their website. In a lot of ways, I kind of became that face of the Red Rock Four-Wheelers, because anytime anybody would post up online or something, it was usually me that they were dealing with. And then I did a blog for a while called Moab Dave, where I wrote on the, my page about, the adventures of a handicapped Jeeper living in Moab, and what it was like and what I went through and what I experienced and, some of the highs and lows of being there. And I met so many amazing people. I mean, I've been on, different TV shows, different commercials, different advertising, from, everything from BF Goodrich to Jeep to Warren to Quadratech. And because I had these opportunities to meet these people and interact with these just fantastic industry reps. And so leaving all that was hard, but Moab wasn't the place that it used to be. It was losing a lot of the fun. It was kind of getting a little bit toxic, especially for me. I had my own set of issues with the Red Rock four-wheelers and ended up actually separating myself from them, because I disagreed with some of the decisions they were making and the way that they were moving forward with the event. It wasn't something I felt like I could support anymore.
Right. Didn't
And
want
so
your
that
name on
was,
it. Right.
yeah, yeah. And that was hard because for so long, Jeep Safari and the Red Rock four wheelers was almost kind of who I identified myself as. I was working hours and hours every day, promoting the event, promoting, the social media pages, trying to get people out there and to show them what it was. And to have that separation, that was hard because that really had to change kind of a little bit of who I am. I was Moab Dave. I mean, if you said Moab Dave, people knew me.
Right.
And so coming out here to Hurricane and living out here in Southwest Utah now, it's been different because I mean I still will be out and obviously my Jeep still that same green and yellow it's been for 25 years. People be like, oh, you guided me on my first trail back in 2004. Do you remember me? No, but sure. And so you really, I just became ingrained in a lot of people's memories because obviously my Jeep is big and bright, so it's obvious. There's not a lot of disabled Jeepers out there, and so it was a fun experience, but it just got to the point that I just couldn't stay in Moab any longer because it just was no longer fun.
Right. Okay. I get it. I
Yeah.
absolutely understand that. I've moved from areas for the same reason. Um,
Hmm.
in the '90s, I lived in Cedar City, and
Right.
it was fun for 3.5 years, and then it was fun for 3 years, and then it started to taper off. It became a lot of hard work for me because I was trying to keep. I went out there for a job, and the job only lasted about 6 months because the guy that I went to work for had and moved and made the commitment for sold the business, and then their same kind of thing. Their whole their way of doing things, what their end goals were not the same,
Yeah.
and this, basically what it was is some guy had bought the business so that he could get his sons involved in something because all his sons ever
Oh,
wanted
gotcha.
to do was golf.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And it was two tire stores that was one in Cedar City and one down in St. George. And at the time I was managing both of them, and the guy that hired me, he wanted 11. We had already designated that we were going to build 11 stores. And before we
Hmm.
could build any others, he wanted to, get these two stores running right. And so I came in to do that, and then he sold the business once he got those two stores right. And it made a big difference, and then it became a struggle. Um, and then we went back to California, and I started CalRock, so it all worked out really good
Right.
for
Yeah,
me,
yeah.
and I think it was good for my kids. But it was it's hard to stay someplace when it's no longer fun, when it becomes toxic, or it just becomes too much work to try to just get through each day.
Right, right. Exactly. And that's where, in so many ways, that kind of light going on in my head with Trail Hero and what Sand Hollow had to offer, it was like, this is where I need to be, and the experience of coming out here. And I mean, the amazing people that we have here in this, Southwest Utah area. I mean, I live in Dixie Springs, which, like I said, is literally right adjacent to Sand Hollow State Park. And I know of at least off the top of my head, 6 rear steer buggies just in my neighborhood.
Right.
And it's like, how many places in the world can you go and have these amazing people and these amazing drivers? And my living girlfriend now, my better half, Sarah, she's gotten into jeeping since she's been out here. She grew up kind of doing a little bit of mudding in the Midwest, but had never experienced anything like this. And, and I always tell her she's getting basically a graduate degree in off-roading, because on any given Saturday, she can go out and get spotted by, your son, Little Rich, or by Dave Wong, or by, Mike Brassanini, or by, any of these Randall Davis, these people that have, got these iconic names in the industry, and they'll go out and they'll take you out. You'll go run Milt's Mile or Double Sammy or, whatever. And to be able to be so ingrained in this community, that it's just been such an amazing place because of what now Sand Hollow is becoming.
Right.
And Sand Hollow now, I think, is even better than the fun that Moab was 20 years ago. And I don't see that changing for quite a while, if ever, and hopefully it won't.
Right. And it'll all come down to how, BLM deals with that open area.
Yes. And that's going to be huge. And that's one thing that, I oftentimes had conversation with the BLM in Moab about. How do we reduce use? Well, the way that you reduce damage is you don't minimize the number of trails. You expand the number of trails. You don't limit it to, 100 people per vehicle or 100 people for a trail per day. What you do is you add more trails, you add more mileage. That's how you mitigate the damage. And I remember having that conversation with the people down at the BLM in Moab. Let's make the sand flats open to cross-country travel.
Right.
Let people go out there and have fun. And like, oh no, it'd be a desert lands, or it'd be a warscape out here. There wouldn't be a tree or a bush or alive. And it's like, well, look at Sand Hollow. There's 66,000 acres where you can literally drive anywhere you want. There's bushes. There's not a lot of trees because it's a desert, but there's trees out there. There's scrub brush. There's cryptobiotic soil out there. Even though people can and legally are allowed to drive anywhere they want, it shows that an open across country travel management area can work on a large scale. And I wish more places understood that it really is a feasible land use management option. Open across country does work.
Yeah. I mean, another perfect example of that is Johnson Valley.
Yes.
Except for the desert floor where, people are going to, maybe spread out a bit, when to stay out of the other person's dust that they're driving with, they're still those hillsides, those, the main opportunity areas, they're just canyons,
Yeah.
And they're going to change anyway when the rain happens.
Right.
And that's when they closed off the Grand Staircase, because of our friends at the, Southern Utah Wilderness Alliance or whatever, SUA. They were fighting BLM, and as the club president at the time of the Color Country 4-Wheel Drive in Cedar City, I started a group that was called the Tri-State Off-Highway Vehicle Association. It was a bunch of clubs, and we ended up with mountain bikers and motorcycle riders and ATVers and horse people, because we knew that, we were going to lose the staircase if the roadless initiatives went through their plans, and they did, because SUA threw more money at it, and I moved. And when I moved, they had one meeting, I guess, after I moved, and then that was it. And it was like, and then that group went away, and it was a shame because we were getting 150 people at a meeting, basically once a week, because that was during the time where they were, going through their plan, and unfortunately we lost that, but it's a shame. So let's talk about some of those television shows and the opportunities you've had. I know that you were on the Truck Night in America, and what was that like?
Truck Night in America was interesting because I had heard of it the first season, but I hadn't watched any of the episodes. And then I met a guy, Hobie, when I was out in Moab, and they just finished season 1. And so actually we were out there with Little Rich doing a trail ride out there, and I ended up riding with Hobie for the day and just had a fantastic day talking with him. And I knew they were getting ready to do season 2, but didn't really know much about it because, the advertisers I saw for season one, I mean, they're shooting paint cans and they're pushing silos over, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is so cheesy. Well, I ended up a couple months after I moved out here getting a call from Hobie and said, hey, what would you think about being on Truck Night season 2? And my first response is, are you kidding me? There's no way I want to destroy my vehicle, because
Right.
so many of them, I mean, they're jumping, they're acting like the Dukes of Hazzard out there, they're slamming into people. And so my initial reaction was no, I had no interest. And then I got thinking about it. I'm like, I've had my Jeep for a long time. I know pretty well what it can and can't do. If I do this, I can do it right. I can do it responsibly without destroying my vehicle. And so I finally responded back to Hobie and said, yeah, I'd like to be in consideration. And so, I went through the entire process, and there were 6,000 applicants, and 60 of us were chosen to be on season 2.
Wow.
And so it ended up being a really, really, really neat experience. They shipped my Jeep out there and flew me and a friend out for the week, and they did the shooting over 3 days, and it was the first time I'd really done anything TV production wise. I mean, I'd been involved in some commercials and some other commercial type stuff, but seeing an actual TV show and what went into that was a really neat experience. And getting to meet the people. And I always say my biggest takeaway from Truck Night in America is the people that I met. Getting to meet people like, Glenn Plake and Bender and Abe Wine and then, of course, Pete Soren, who was my coach.
Right.
And, that memory that I have of Pete and he and I working together, getting through that. And then, unfortunately, with his passing, that winter, that opportunity that I had to meet him and interact with him was, those are memories that I'll cherish for the rest of my life. And it was just such an incredible experience. And I remember I knew when I went out there, I watched all of season 1 at that time, which, like I said, they needed some refining, and season 2 did get much better. But my 2 goals were to not be eliminated in the first challenge, because nobody ever knows that guy's name.
Right.
And the second was to not quit unless they actually make me stop.
Okay.
And so those are my goals. I didn't care if I won, because $10,000 isn't going to change anybody's life. I mean, they make it think like this, huge amount of money, and it's not.
No.
You can go through $10,000 heck almost on a set of tires these days. But I was able to go out and I was able to compete, and I was able to go out and I think show people that just because I'm disabled, just because, I can't walk 10 feet, doesn't mean I can't drive up this 10-foot waterfall. And so that aspect was really neat. I had a lot of fun, and it ended up being a really very positive experience. And I'm very, very glad I did it.
Yeah. And the second year, if I remember right, like you were talking about the first year, shooting the paint cans and pushing over the silo and doing some of the things that they were doing, they were kind of, it was kind of hokey. And
Yes.
The second season was more wheeling.
Yes. Yeah, they got a new course designer, a guy you may know named Little Rich. Yeah. And he brought a lot of legitimacy to it, because it's funny, because I was talking to a couple of the people after the event, because I didn't know that Little Rich was doing the courses when I originally applied for season 2. And ended up finding that out later after I got accepted. But the actual producers of the TV show is an older lady that lives in New York that has never had a driver's license. And she's the one trying to do this off-road show, and just showed that they had no idea what they were doing. And so it was interesting, going back to even watching season 1 versus season 2 and seeing how it became more like legit wheeling. Like some of the challenges we ended up doing, probably the most famous one was the creek climb, was one that I ended up doing. And to me, I'm like, this is just Moab. I mean, this is just like going up through Mickey's hot tub. I just get into it, roll on up, get a little momentum, and, and away I go. And so it was fun seeing that the more real type of wheeling it got in season 2. And I was really looking forward to it progressing. And then, of course, like I think it was so many things, money is what killed it. And they needed more money, and the History Channel only wanted to give them this. And then with Pete's passing, and then it was really unfortunate that it didn't continue on, because I think it just would have continued to have gotten better and draw more people into the idea of what off-roading really is.
Right. Yeah, I actually applied um, for one of the host jobs
Oh,
and
did you?
didn't realize, I had no idea who else was doing it. They approached me and said, "Hey, you want to do this?" And then after that, um, then I started finding out who else had applied, and then found out the four guys that they did pick. It was like, okay, I see what they were looking for, and I wasn't, I'm not that type of personality where I'm kind of over the top.
Yeah.
Where Glenn, yeah, definitely.
Oh
Um,
my gosh, yeah.
Abe, same thing. Pistol Pete. When you can look at that a group like that and say, Bender is probably the sanest of that group. You're saying something.
Right. Yeah, anytime Bender has to be the voice of reason, that's always scary.
sorry, Bender, but it's
Right.
true.
We love you, Rob. Yeah. No, but it's so true. And meeting those guys, and I mean, it was such an awesome experience. Then even my fellow competitors, I mean, those that have seen the episode, I mean, on the very first course, I ended up jumping my Jeep, and it was my own stupid fault. I didn't have my harnesses tightened appropriately. And so when my Jeep landed, my harnesses actually came down off my shoulder, and I literally bent my steering wheel with my face.
Wow.
Um, People don't realize, they think that happened after I hit Sue, the other competitor. And that's not what happened. That's the reason I hit Sue, the other competitor, is because I literally bounced my face off my steering wheel, cut my nose, and I remember looking up and seeing Sue in front of me. And I remember looking down at the brake pedal and thinking, I need to push that. And it was just that half a second that it just knocked me for enough of a loop that I ended up running into Sue. And I mean, gratefully didn't cause, much damage to either vehicle. Mine got a little bit of cosmetic damage, but yeah, because that's never happened before.
Right.
But yeah, I definitely learned you can bend your steering wheel with your face, and literally ran into this lady who I'd seen at breakfast that morning, and that was it. And now she and I are good friends. I've been out wheeling the Rubicon with her and her husband and two boys, and she's coming out here to Trail Hero this year. And the people and the opportunity I had to meet, and even some of the other competitors from the various different, both season 1 or season 2. We've got a little Facebook group, and we all kept in touch for a while. And a lot of them have come out to Trail Hero. A couple of them came out to Moab while I was still there, and that experience was absolutely worth it for the people that I met and I still have involved in my life.
Excellent. Yeah. After that, after I when the show when they were getting ready to try to find people to go on the show, I started getting calls from one of the talent search people, and they were going, okay, this is what I'm looking for. I am looking for a person that is of this demographic. And, it was age, sex, nationality. They really wanted to be inclusive.
Right.
And so I ended up giving them a long list of names, and I was absolutely amazed at how many ended up on the show. From I gave them, I probably gave them 20 names, 25 names over those 2 years, for those two seasons, and I think that probably at least 10 or 12 of them got on there.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I'm not going to say who and what the people were what the scouts were looking for, but if you see that diversity of the people out there, it wasn't that typical 18 to 35 white guy.
Right.
Right.
And that's what I thought with me was I mean, they brought out some amazing people. I mean, yeah, there were a couple grandmas that they brought out, and these mud truck racers, and these, stuff like that. And it really was a good mix. We really had a lot of fun. It was an opportunity to have people that you never would have met otherwise. It never would have been in the same room otherwise, if it hadn't been for that commonality of, the off-roading and enjoying that aspect.
Right. So living in southern Utah now, um, or western southern Utah, that St. George hurricane area. Are you working at this time? Have you retired from teaching completely, or what's your day-to-day thing?
So long answer, I guess short would be I'm not currently working. I do quite a bit of volunteering with some of the different local organizations and stuff out here. Most importantly for me is a group that we have called Hero for a Day.
Okay.
And it actually is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that was started kind of piggybacking with Trail Hero and now has become our own entity. And I'm the vice president of that organization. And our focus is to provide motorized recreation for special needs individuals and veterans. And so it's been a really, really rewarding opportunity. Obviously, that's something near and dear to my heart because with my disability, my Jeep is literally my replacement for my legs.
Right.
And so we've been able to have some really amazing chances where we've been able to take out special needs individuals as well as veterans, show them what we do, show them the outdoors, give them the opportunity to go out and have fun. And it's been a really, really neat thing to be able to do. Like one of our big events we just did earlier this month was we do a big 4th of July barbecue where we take out a lot of our local veterans up on an area called the West Rim. And the West Rim, you can overlook the entire St. George Valley. And so we go up there and we take the veterans who then can watch the fireworks, but they're far enough away they don't feel the concussions or hear the detonations. And so therefore you're not triggering into that PTSD and stuff like that. And I think this year we had like 120 people up there. We all, we cooked barbecue burgers and hot dogs and just had a fantastic time up there, just enjoying our veterans and showing our appreciation to them.
Well, that's
Um,
awesome.
we've actually been real blessed that the BLM has been very supportive of us, and we have a trail that was formed about 4 or 5 years ago called the Fallen, and it's got 9 major obstacles on it, and each one of those obstacles is dedicated to the fallen soldiers from the 20th century. Starting with World War I, World War II, Korea, and as you progress through the trail gets a little bit more difficult until you get to the final obstacle, which is a pretty gnarly 9-rated big V crack. And then at the end of that, we've been able to get a 99-year lease from the BLM on an area that we've called the drill grounds. That is a war veterans memorial.
Oh,
And we
nice.
actually put a flagpole up there that's got a solar light on it. We actually have a little memorial area where we have a bench, and each bench is dedicated to one of the branches of the fallen members of Air Force, Army, Navy, Coast Guard, Marines. The natural rock is kind of a very, I don't know how to put it, but it's got like little notches and niches and stuff in it. So a lot of people put little mementos in there of veterans they've known who have passed away or family members or things like that. And so we actually have that as a 99-year lease from the BLM, and it's the only dedicated war or veterans memorial or any type of memorial like that, as far as I know, in southern Utah, out on BLM property.
That's awesome. I didn't know that there was the 99-year lease and that it was set up as a memorial like that. I knew I knew about it, but I didn't know that much. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been really cool. We've had a lot of really good volunteers that have actually gone in and carved a set of stairs out of the natural sandstone. And then we actually have a handrail there, so people even with mobility issues and things like that can still be able to get up there and be able to access the main part of the drill grounds. And it really is a solemn area. I mean, you go up there and it's just kind of a little natural bowl. It's got a big old huge rock wall on one side. They're actually getting ready to be mounting a big old metal flag that we got from Laser Nut. Cody made for us. We're going to be mounting that up there with a couple solar lights, and it's a solemn feeling, and it's really neat to be able to have this, especially if you go up and you run the Fallen, to then get up there and have this memorial ground that's been dedicated. It really is a neat thing, and so I'm doing some things like that. I'm helping out with some of the other local, events. Of course, I help with Trail Hero and Winter Jamboree and things like that. But right now, I'm not working full time. I am in the process of getting a handicap van be built for me, which will then allow me to be able to start going out and doing things on my own again. And when that happens, I probably will continue doing some more volunteering and, some working with some of the local charity organizations in the area is my goal.
Okay. Let's talk about your Jeep, and
Okay.
especially the mobility issues that you have been able to overcome with I would imagine from help with outside sources.
Yes.
You know, talk about that some.
Yeah. So when I got my Jeep, I was young and stupid, and when I would break it, I couldn't afford to fix it. And so I had to learn very quickly how to try to fix what I could when I could, because, I was a cheap college kid. I was just trying to survive. And so I became a very, very poor shade tree mechanic. And, I know just about enough to get me in trouble, but not really accomplish a whole lot. But as I've gotten older, my disability has progressed. Even though I have some of the knowledge, my body just can't do it anymore.
Right.
My fingers have a hard time holding the tools or holding the wrench or holding the things like that. I can't stand now for more than about a minute at a time. And so as a result of that, I've had a lot of really good friends who have helped up and who have helped me keep my Jeep going, who have, put in countless hours to, keeping me in my rig. And, Steve Nance, when I was in Moab, I mean, he was huge. He sponsored me for several years by giving me some free labor and helping me to keep my Jeep up and going, because he realized how important it was for me to be able to get out and do it, both for my mental aspect, my physical aspect, my everything. I mean, it literally is therapeutic when I get out and get to go on the trail.
Right. And that's
And
Steve Nance from Sand Hollow Off Road. Right.
yeah, when he was out in Moab under Moab 4x4 outpost,
Right.
and now of course he's out here with Sand Hollow off road, absolutely, and just a fantastic guy. I mean, not just if you know Steve, none of that story surprises you. I mean, I can tell stories all day about Steve Nance and some of the amazing things that he's done for me, and just an awesome guy. He's the epitome of the people that we need in this industry, because he's just that guy.
Right. And then
Um,
there's a lift that you guys did to get in and out of the Jeep.
Yep. And so there's a local company here called Cargo Glide out of St. George. And when I was getting ready to go on Truck Night in America, they were trying to figure out what would be the best way to get me in and out of my Jeep, because at that point I couldn't get in it by myself. I would have to use like kind of a step stool and kind of step up on one step and then step up on another step and then get my foot up in my Jeep. And it was sketchy. Not gonna lie, there's a couple times I didn't make it.
Okay.
And so I had this local company that said, hey, we've got this, basically it's a roof rack system, and we think we can apply it to your Jeep. So what they ended up doing is they took my two front seats and they put it on this rail system. And they ended up having to widen my driver's side door, so that way the back of the seat will slide out. And my entire whole seat mechanism, both driver, passenger seat, center console, everything, will slide out my Jeep and then tip down at a 45-degree angle with an electric winch. So I can stand up from my scooter, sit down on the edge of the seat, push the button, the winch will suck my Jeep back in and then slide me back into my Jeep. And I'm in my Jeep and I'm ready to go.
That's awesome.
That was 100% donated to me just because, some friends and some businesses wanted to be able to see me still go wheeling. And so that was a very humbling thing to have that donated to me. And I've had several different experiences like that where people, different companies or different individuals have stepped up and have helped me out with some things just because they're good people, and I've been very blessed because of that.
Excellent. So cool. So the transition of your Jeep, it started
Mhm.
off with the carbureted 4.2, like you said.
Yep. Yep.
Let's go through the process or the steps, some of the steps you've made to get the Jeep the way it is now, because it is no longer a stock Jeep.
No, there's not a whole lot of stock left. And people always say, well, what year is your Jeep? And my always answer is, well, what part? You know, because when I bought it in 1999 as a mostly stock little CJ7, and there's not a lot of 1984, and there's not a lot of CJ7 left to it. And a lot of that is because I started building it and I started using it and I started abusing it. And I rolled my Jeep for the first time 3 months after I bought it. And so within the first year of owning my Jeep, I was getting ready to put a new tub on it because I jacked up the original tub and the original roll cage. And at that time, Charlie Copsey did a lot of the work on my Jeep back then. Um, I had a girlfriend who was driving it and ended up getting T-boned and broke my frame. And so I was talking to Charlie about what to do. And he said, well, we could always put another CJ7 frame in it. Or if you want, we could put a YJ frame in it, which is going to be stronger. Or I just barely put a TJ frame under my CJ7, and that'll give you coil springs. And I said, yes, let's do that.
Perfect.
And this would have been in like late 2000, maybe early 2001. And I mean, mine was one of the, I would say, besides Charlie, probably one of the very first CJ7s out there on coil springs. You know, I mean, this was before the Warren coil spring conversion. This was before, you know, any of that type of stuff, because Charlie was able to find this TJ frame. I think TJ's had only been out for a couple of years at that time. And he put that TJ frame under it. And I was running a Terraflex short arm 4-inch coil spring kit on my CJ.
Yeah,
You
that
know?
was, and that's definitely progressive back then.
Yeah. Yeah. And I still have most of that TJ frame left. It's been stretched, it's been modified, and it's been back halved and stuff like that. But I still have a lot of that same TJ frame that Charlie put in, you know, 22 years ago or something like that. And, you know, of course, did the V8. I ran a AMC 360 with the Turbo 400 and, you know, a Dana 300 for years and years and years, you know, and then the 360 started getting tired, so I ended up swapping to a, you know, a 5.7 Vortec and put in a 700 R4. Because in Moab, I was still driving my Jeep to the trails. You know, I wouldn't trailer when I was in Moab. I'd drive all the way out to the Pickle, or I would drive all the way down to BFE. So I wanted that overdrive. So I put the 700 R4 in, you know, eventually switched to an Atlas, you know, did 1-ton conversion, you know, help with, you know, some friends, you know, some good friends like Jeff Stevens in Moab and some people like that, and just built it and built it and built it. And I'm to the point now, I mean, I'm on, I'd really have to think about it, probably my 5th motor, probably my 7th transmission, 3rd transfer case, 2nd frame, 5th body, 4th roll cage, you know, I mean,
It never
on and
stops.
on and on. Right, right. And it's just, it is what it is. It's kind of that iconic Jeep that I've thought about, you know, do I just two buggy it? Do I just give up the ghost and just, you know, cut all the body panels off? Because I mean, it's basically a two buggy underneath, you know, with all the running gear and stuff. But I just like the idea of having a Jeep.
Right.
You know, granted, it's not much of a CJ7 besides just kind of the body panels and the front clip, but it still looks like a Jeep. Anybody's going to see that and think, yep, that's a Jeep. And I've always loved that look of the CJ, you know, the CJ grill, the rounded hood. I just think, to me, that's one of the best looking Jeeps they ever made.
Absolutely.
And so for now, I keep the old girl, and you know, she's cantankerous and she breaks down and she has issues and she always needs something. But that's what old Jeeps are, and that's why we love and that's why we do it.
True enough. So let's talk about your grill addiction.
Okay.
And we're not talking barbecues.
Right, right. Although I do enjoy a good barbecue, don't get me wrong.
Right, true. So how did you start getting into collecting Jeep grills?
Honestly, it was kind of funny. I was driving home from a friend's house in Moab. I was coming down Spanish Valley Drive in Moab, and I just happened to see an old Willys pickup in somebody's backyard. And I had just bought a Willys pickup not too long before that. I bought a 1951 Willys pickup in 2010 or 11. And so this would have been probably about 2013 or so. And there's not a lot of Willys pickups in Moab. I mean, there are not a lot of Willys pickups anywhere. And so I saw this, so I kind of pulled in, and I got thinking, oh, I wonder if they had any parts or anything, or just want to kind of check it out. And I ended up seeing, literally over against this rock wall, this old Jeep grill leaning up against there. I didn't really know what it was. It kind of looked like a Willys pickup grill, but it was just a little bit different than mine. But it was kind of this old rusted red. It had some of the chrome horizontal bars on it. And I was like, that's really neat. And so literally knocked on the door of the trailer park and said, hey, you know, I was interested in this Willys pickup you guys have out here, and I saw a couple of the parts. Well, they were just renting. So they gave me the number of the guy that owned the property. And so I ended up calling him and talking to him. And, I went out and looked. He had a couple Willys pickups, an old Willys wagon, and, some stuff that had been used back in the mining days, back in the 50s and 60s. So that was the first grill I actually bought from him. I think I bought it for like $75. And I thought, it'd be cool to get some of the old cheap grills. I always was a fan of the old Willys, of course. And so I thought, get maybe a couple flat fender grills, and really, maybe a couple CJ grills, some stuff like that. And so I started collecting them, and I started looking around, and I got one, and I got another, and then I got another. And pretty soon I had about a half a dozen. I thought, you know what? I'm pretty cool now. I've got just about every one of the major Jeeps, because I had, a Commando, and I had a CJ7, and I had a CJ2A and a 3A, and I had a CJ5, and I had a couple Willys pickup grills. And but it'd be neat to have those, maybe a couple of the Wranglers if I come across them. And then it just kind of kept going. And then I found more. And then I found more. And then I was able to actually find some really, really rare pieces. I mean, one of my most unique pieces I actually have the 1941 slat grill that was made when Willys was making the very early Willys MB. And somebody posted a picture on one of the Facebook pages that I was on, says, hey, if anybody's interested, I know the guy that owns this. And I messaged him and said, yeah, I'm very interested. Could you give me his number? Well, he kind of hemmed and hawed, and I kind of stayed with him. Finally, a month later, I get this phone number. Literally this random guy I've never met, and I have no idea anything about him, lives in Delaware. And I call up this guy, and I said, hey, I know this is weird, but here's a story. I heard that you have this old Jeep grill. I've got a Jeep grill collection. I'm trying to, collect. I ended up talking to this guy for almost an hour and a half. I mean, was just such a cool guy. He'd been a Jeeper back in the day. He was an old farm guy in Delaware. He's got this old dairy ranch back there. And he said back in the early 90s, he was at a farm auction and bought a pallet of just random parts. Didn't even know what it was. Got it for like $100 or something like that. And there on the very bottom of this pallet was this slat grill. And he knew it was a Jeep grill, but didn't really know much about it. And so anyway, ended up being able to buy that from him, and had some friends that were coming out to Jeep Safari from Virginia that were able to pick it up and bring it out to me. And it's been such a unique experience, because I've been able to literally meet and buy grills from people all across the country. I've had so many of them that were delivered to me by good friends. A good friend out of Michigan that brought me a couple, or somebody that literally drove up from Florida a couple years ago that brought me one, or out of California or Washington. And I now would say definitively I have the most complete Willys and Jeep grill collection of anybody in the world. I have everything from the slat grill all the way, every single model of Willys and Jeep up to 2005, plus all the modern Wranglers.
That's awesome.
Eventually, I'll get, the more modern stuff, but I have a hard time justifying spending a couple $100 on a Jeep Liberty grill, So eventually I'll get them all up. But right now, I think my collection is up to 57 pieces. Like I said, every single one a different grill. And they're all going up in my garage. And when my garage is done, eventually my goal is to have it all like a little Jeep museum with my grill collection. And I also have about 20 tailgates from the various different Jeep trucks. But I have ended up being really blessed in this, because I have Jeep grills that most Jeep aficionados have never even heard of, let alone seen.
Nice.
One that I have is called a CJV35U. And it actually was a prototype that there were only 1,000 of them made in 1951, because at that time the U.S. had just gotten involved in Korea, and the Marines were looking for a forward vehicle that could actually ford water. And they needed a vehicle that could go through water up to a foot over the over the hood. Wow. And so they came out with this CJ35V or CJV35U, the U standing for underwater, because you actually had a button that you could flip on the dashboard, and it would overpressurize the transmission, the transfer case, and the motor in order to keep water out of them.
Huh.
And so this was a guy that he posted up that he had a grill, a tailgate, and a tub for one. And again, like I said, there were only 1,000 of these made back in 1951, and I only know of 3 complete that still exist of the CJ V35U. And it took me almost 2 years of messaging him back and forth before he finally decided to part with that grill and tailgate. And funny enough, I actually had one of my good friends, Jake White. He was out at the off-road convention out in Tennessee and was able to meet up with the guy and pick it up for me because the guy wasn't willing to ship them. And ended up, that kind of got passed down to a couple friends before eventually it made its way out here and is now hanging up on my wall. So
That's awesome.
it's been a lot of fun. You know, another one that I really, really like is I had a guy in 2018 that posted up on one of the early Jeep grill groups that I've got that he has this World War II Jeep grill. Well, of course, it's immediately going to catch my attention. Well, the more I did a little bit of research into it and we started talking, he actually was in the Ukraine, and he and a couple business partners are World War II salvagers. And they had, in May of 2018, found this Jeep that had been destroyed outside the Russian city of Kharkov. And by doing some research, I found that that was a battle that was happening when the Russians were basically surrounded the Fifth Army in Stalingrad, and the Germans were trying to break in to free their troops. This is one of the battles that happened in February of 1943, and this Jeep was destroyed and literally buried in the Ukrainian soil for almost 80 years. And so the guy was able to dig it out of the ground. It was the only salvageable part of the Jeep, but I mean, it's rusted, it's dinged, and it's dented. I mean, you can tell it's seen some stuff. And I did some research to make sure that it was legal for me to be able to import it. And lo and behold, I did. And so by June of 2018, that grill was back here in my living room. So I always say that that's my MIA who went off to war, you know, driven by or built by Americans, driven into combat by Soviets, destroyed by Nazis, spent 80 years in the Russian soil, and I repatriated, brought it home, and now it has a place of honor hanging up in my kitchen.
Wow, that's awesome. That's a
So
great story.
I just had so many like that of things that shouldn't have worked, that shouldn't have happened. And either a friend or a friend found out about a grill or heard about this tailgate or heard about this, you know, whatever. And it's been fun. And I love going out to my garage and looking at these. And I don't repair them. I don't fix them. I literally wash them with soap and water and I hang them on the wall because they all have their story to tell. Whether they're dinged and dented or broken or missing a headlight or missing a slat or, you know, something like that, it's what they've been through. It's the life that they've experienced. I think 9 of them are military, you know, all the way back from World War II, all the way up to I have a M151 Mutt, you know, from the Vietnam era. And I would love to sit down and have them all tell me what they saw, who owned them, what they experienced, what they did. But by having this collection, I try to make that live on. I try to make this as almost like a living diagram of what Jeep was and what it has become. You know, because literally at the very top left of my corner, I got this slat grill, and at the very bottom of my garage, I've got a JT grill. You know, and just about everything in between, with the exception just a few of the late model, you know, more plastic style grills.
Right. So the evolution, and you've been able to find all those. So that's just phenomenal. That's cool.
Yeah, it's been fun. And then literally right now I have every single one up to 2005. My last one is the second model Liberty. And then after that, I would need to get like the Commander and the Patriot and the Compass and, you know, start getting into some more of those, which eventually I'll get, but haven't yet.
Is there anything of you know, back in the day that, like your 35V hood or grill, that is there that unicorn out there that you're looking for still?
I actually just got another really rare one that's sitting at my dad's house right now. It actually is off a 1961 Willys Fleet van. And I think you're familiar with the fact that I'm in the current process of building a fleet van to be my daily driver, my handicap accessible vehicle.
Right.
And so they only made about 1,800 of those for the post office back in the early 60s. And they were designed as right-hand drive, and you actually stood up to drive them. There was no driver's seat. You literally, the brake went straight up and down with your left foot, and your right foot stood on the ground and turned sideways to give it gas. And I obviously have one because I have one on my actual fleet van that's being built. But I just recently had a guy that contacted me and said, "Hey, I've got some old fleet van parts. Would you be interested in them?" "Sure, what do you have?" "Oh, I've got this, that, and I've got a grill." "Shut up, you've got a grill?" And ended up, the guy's like, "You know what? $20 and it's yours." And I mean, this is a grill you couldn't find. I mean, I probably couldn't find this grill for $1,000 if I was out there looking.
That's pretty
And
cool.
so it's just been an interesting experience to be able to have these. And so many of them, I have no right to claim that I did anything, but I just happened to be at the right place at the right time.
Yeah, or people hearing that's what you do.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Cool.
Yeah.
So what's next for David? What do you how do you see the future playing out?
Well, I think what I want to do is I'm gonna continue to stay active in the off-road industry, of course. I mean, to me, that's life. I mean, that's family. I mean, it's very rare that I go somewhere on vacation that doesn't either involve wheeling or involve visiting friends that I've met through wheeling, because they're really some of the best people out there. I mean, I'm sure you've experienced this hundreds and hundreds of times. If you were to take two people that are into off-roading and put them in a room together, more than likely they're going to get along well.
Yes.
Because we're all kind of a little bit crazy. We're all a little bit type A. We all like the outdoors, and we all just kind of have a screw loose, and that's kind of just who we are. And so the off-road world is me. I mean, that's what I'm going to be. As long as I can do it for as long as I can. I actually bought a comp buggy from Craig Stump, his old Commando that I'm sure you've seen go through the entire process of changing.
Absolutely.
Yep, I bought that from him a couple of years ago and have just finished making some major changes. So I actually will be able to control the front axle with the joystick so I can get out. So I'm hoping to be able to do some competitions, probably not this year because life's been kind of crazy this summer, but I'm hoping next year I'll be able to go out and do some of the competitions with that and, keep doing Trail Hero, keep doing the different events, keep doing the Hero for a Day and, just living life as long as I can every day that I can.
Excellent. That's good. David, I want to say thank you so much for joining us with Conversations with Big Rich and having a great conversation and learning, you sharing your life and, your passion for off-road and everything related to that, which it boils down to, just like everybody else has said, it really comes down to the personalities and the people that we meet.
Yes, without a doubt.
Yeah. And I appreciate you spending the time with us. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Rich. You have a great day. I appreciate your time.
Okay. Talk to you later. Thank you.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, that's another episode of Conversations with Big Rich. I'd like to thank you all for listening. If you could do us a favor and leave us a review on any podcast service that you happen to be listening on, or send us an email or a text message or a Facebook message, and let me know any ideas that you have, or if there's anybody that you have that you think would be a great guest, please forward the contact information to me so that we can try to get them on. And always remember, live life to the fullest. Enjoying life is a must. Follow your dreams and live life with all the gusto you can. Thank you.